Jane, thanks so much for joining us, and thank you so much for doing this. So, welcome everyone to our first coffee chat of the fall. I am so glad to see so many familiar and new faces. My name is Janine Vanderburg, co-founder of Changing the Narrative, and a longtime advocate for age inclusion and against ageism. These days, I'm focusing on my role as CEO of Encore Roadmap. Um, and Encore Roadmap basically does three things. We educate employers and anyone who will actually listen on the business case for older workers and intergenerational teams. We help Encore seekers create roadmaps for their what's next, and spend a lot of time advocating for age-friendly public policies. We did take a summer break from coffee chats. And when we're back this fall, one of the things I've been hearing from a lot of people that I talked to over the summer is they're wanting to know more about how it is that people who successfully kind of transition from one career to another to do something else in their other phase of life. So the coffee chats that we are going to resume this fall with this one with Sky Bergman are going to focus on people who've actually successfully done that kind of encore. But they're going to be talking not only on how they did it, but also kind of tips they have, and what their work is now, because we want to showcase the great work of people who've been doing this transition. A reminder that these chats are open to the public, and if our guest agrees, which Sky Bergman has, we are going to be recording them. The way it will typically work is I'm going to interview a guest speaker for about 15 to 20 minutes. That's the way it's usually going to work. It's not the way it's going to work today. And what we'll do in some of them is we will do short breakout rooms where you can add your ideas. We'll come back. But having said that, the reason we're going to do things differently is we got tons of questions from you all for Sky Bergman. It may be because Sky is known as a filmmaker and just a popular person. I'm not sure, Sky, but we got tons of questions for you. So what we're going to do is we are going to queue up as many questions as possible. And then at the end, if we still have time, I will ask if you've got additional questions, and I will ask you to put them in the chat. There are two categories of questions that we are not going to talk about here that people queued up. One of them is a whole set of questions about workplace age discrimination. Sky's not going to talk about that. That's not her area of expertise, but we did do a program this spring featuring employment attorney Gary Phelan, and you can find the recording of that, and I'm putting on my YouTube channel, and there is a link to it right now. There was also another set of questions about finding a job after 50. Again, we're not going to talk about that, but you can go to that same YouTube channel and find a coffee chat that we did with Lisa Jensen also this spring that will give you, she gave tons and tons of great advice. I will also be sending out on Friday a follow-up email from this chat, and it will have a bunch of links, etc. And honestly, I'm going to try to get both Gary and Lisa back this fall. So we'll see. But right now, no, we're not talking about workplace age discrimination, even though we know it's prevalent and real, and we're not going to talk about job hunting. So with that, my request to all of you is pretty simple. Our rules, if you can stay on mute because of the number of people we have joining us, keep your videos on because we love to see, and I know Sky would love to see who's here in the room. And if you personally know about resources that are useful for having intergenerational conversations, intergenerational connections, if you could put them in the chat. On Friday, when I send out the follow-up to this, I'm also going to be sending out an updated intergenerational conversation toolkit, and I would like to include your resources as well. Okay, we're good. Are we ready to get started? I'm going to go ahead, and I am first going to pin myself, and then I'm going to try to spotlight myself. That may not work. I'm going to go ahead and I am going to spotlight Sky Bergman, my guest. Now I'm going to try to add a spotlight for me. Did that work now? Can we see?
That works.
Okay. I love it when that works. All right. So, with that, I'm going to introduce my friend and colleague, Sky Bergman, who I think is the perfect guest for September. And for those of you who aren't aware, September is International Intergenerational Month. Sky is Professor Emeritus of Photography and Video at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. She's an award-winning photographer and filmmaker. Her PBS documentary, Lives Well Lived, and companion book, and let me show companion book, a favorite, um, highlights lessons on aging well and connecting across generations. She creates films that connect, inspire, and celebrate the richness of human experience. I first met Sky early on in Changing the Narrative, and we hosted her on a program to talk about her film Lives Well Lived. And I'm thrilled to be featured in her book by the same name, where shared not only the stories from the film, but also gave a lot of interviews with people who are doing intergenerational programming. And I know that some of you may have been featured in that book as well. So, with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Sky, when you and I were emailing this weekend, you said you had a few new films on the horizon, which we're excited to learn about. So, I'm wondering if we could start with you maybe sharing your screen, talking a little bit about those new films, as well as the importance of storytelling and your Lives Well Lived project to the intergenerational movement.
Absolutely. Well,
Go
first of
for it.
all, thank you all for being here. I mean, this is amazing to see so many people on a Zoom room. I know what it is like to get on Zoom these days, and it's just so nice to see so many people. And Janine, I am honored to be the first coffee chat of the fall, starting things off. So I'm going to go through really quickly because I know there's a lot of questions. So I just want to go through really quickly a little bit of my background and talk a little bit about how I got to where I'm at today and a little bit about the films that I'm working on. So I think I grew up with a camera in my hands. This is me at about 5 years old. And I just always loved storytelling. In fact, when I was a kid, I would sit down at the dining room table with my grandparents, my whole family, extended family, and I would put a tape recorder on the table and just listen to the story, record the stories that were coming out. And I was lucky enough to have a grandmother who was super amazing. And she lived to be 103. And when I was turning 50, which was about 10 years ago, but when I started this project when I was about 46, 47, she was turning 100. And I was looking for positive role models of aging and just not finding them. And now I think that's changed. I think there's more positive role models of aging, thankfully. But at the time, all I saw in the media was everything you could do to avoid aging. And here in my own family, I had this incredible role model of my grandmother who at 100 was still going to the gym and still working out. And so I really started a very personal project of that became the film Lives Well Lived, which is on PBS and Amazon and iTunes, and all as a result of my very close relationship to my grandmother, my first intergenerational relationship, I suppose, and growing up in her kitchen and at her feet. And so I spent actually 4 years interviewing 40 people with a collective life experience of 3,000 years for the Lives Well Lived film. And I am going to give everyone that's on this Zoom call today, Janine's going to give out in that email that she's going to send out a link so that you can all watch that film for free. And also download the book as a PDF or an EPUB. And so these are just some of the people that I interviewed. I'm going to go through this quickly because I know some of you on this call have already heard me talk about Lives Well Lived, so I want to get to the other stuff. But what an amazing project that it was to work on this and to really get this out there in the world, and still getting it out there in the world. There are still people, I'm showing it all over. It's amazing, the evergreen power of this film and how needed I think it is right now. We all need something positive, and this is pretty upbeat. And this is I was asked so many times, what did you learn along the way from interviewing all these people? So I thought that I would share that. And in the book, I go more into depth about these things. But one of the things that really I learned was that everyone needs to have a sense of purpose, no matter what age we are, and that can change over time. But it's so important to have that sense of purpose, that reason for being, the reason that we get up. they also need to have a sense of community. And I remember reading a couple of years ago that smoking 15 cigarettes a day is about the same as a loneliness factor. And we all know that there's a social isolation and loneliness factor, not just in older adults, but in young people as well. And so forming that sense of community, feeling like you are part of something bigger than yourself is very vitally important. And then there is this idea of positivity and attitude. I'm often reminded of Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, when he talked about really your attitude is the only thing that you have control over. And these people in the film really exude that. And I think this goes hand in hand with that is this sense of resilience, of being able to overcome adversity. Because the people that I interviewed, many of them had lived through World War II, had lived through really difficult times. And I know that many times I reflect back on what I interviewed them about and just I think about my day and I'm able to shift my attitude and think about their resilience and how can I overcome. And especially right now, I think we need more of that. For example, this is Marianne Wolf, who she actually grew up in Berlin, Germany, escaped to Vienna, only for that to be taken over by Germany, and then finally escaped to the United Kingdom through what was the very first kinder transport out of Vienna, Austria. And that's her on the left at 8 years old, and her when I interviewed her at 84. And I often think back to what was I doing at 8 years old? I mean, it just is amazing to me to put myself in their shoes. Susie Edelbauman, a Japanese American who was interned during World War II. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about her later on because she inspired one of the films that I'm working on now. But really, I mean, I learned all these lessons, but one of the most important things that I learned was how important it was to have friends of different generations and how important it was to connect generations. And what a gift it was that my grandmother left me because I felt like I had 40 new friends, 40 new grandparents that I could call on. And so, and when I grew up, I was lucky because this is me as a gawky 12-year-old standing next to my great grandmother, my mom, and my grandmother. And I grew up in that house. So I lived with all of them. And that was something that was so, I mean, it was such an amazing gift to have all that wisdom and those connections. So I didn't realize how many people didn't have that in their lives. And after I made the film, I connected with somebody who teaches here at the same university that I do, Sarah Bartlett, who is the woman wearing the black in the front. And she teaches a class called The Psychology of Aging. And for the last 10 years, we've been doing projects where we connect generations, where we show the film to students and older adults. And then they use the questions that I had from the film to get to know each other as a starting point for a bilateral conversation. And then I have the honor of doing a photo shoot, and it's really lovely. I just have such a great time photographing these pairs or trios of students and older adults who come together. And of course, what they all learn is that they have far more in common than their differences. Their only difference is their age. And I think that I know a number of the questions are, how do you make these things happen? Well, you have to have an idea and you have to try and have some energy behind it and passion behind it to make it happen. And I love that this is just a small smattering of the people that have been affected by this Lives Will Live Generations project. And we have the students at the very end answer these 4 questions. In a PowerPoint presentation, so they have to put something together at the end. And I'll share this with Janine so she can share this with all of you. But we have comments from older adults and students. And again, it's really, one of the comments is, I love the stereotype smashing that happens in this program from both directions. And so whatever we can do to bring generations together is so vitally important. And for those of you that know anyone in the education system, I gave my film to PBS Learning Media for free, and it's available for K through 12 teachers to use as part of this intergenerational connections through storytelling using the film and clips of the film. So I am happy to give that link to anyone that is interested, that an educator can use that for free. And these are just some of the questions that I asked that have been used in the project. And then I decided that I am dyslexic, so one of the hardest things for me to do is write. But I have always found that instead of things being an obstacle, I make them a challenge. And so to overcome that challenge, I started writing this book. And because it's so many people that ask me, please tell us what you learned and how you didn't created the film. But I also was very interested in that point about connecting generations. That really became kind of the thrust of my work. And so, as Janine alluded to earlier, I interviewed 40 different organizations and people around the globe that are doing amazing work connecting generations. And in the book, there are QR codes. There's wonderful stories about why people got involved in doing this. There's QR codes and links to link to all these different organizations. And hopefully it will inspire other people to want to also connect generations. And on a very personal note, one of the things that I do to have generations in my life is I have a ladies' dinner, usually the first Monday of every month. And I have about 70 to 80 people that come, and people anywhere from in their 20s to their 90s, because it's a potluck dinner, super easy for everyone. It doesn't have to be a heavy lift to do something to connect generations. That is something that works for me to stay connected to people of all different ages. So I'm really quickly going to talk about the 3 new films that I'm working on. I'm super excited about them. The first, as I mentioned earlier, was inspired by Susie Edelbaumann, who is in my Lives Will Live film. And she is her family, which is the Edo family, does what's called a Mochi Suki every year to bring in the new year. And I had no idea what that was, but she invited me and I came with camera in hand, and boy, was I glad that I did. And most people probably think of mochi as what we see in Trader Joe's or Costco, mochi ice cream. In fact, that is not mochi at all. Well, there's some mochi in that, but it's not. And also, I always feel the more personal a story, the more universal it becomes. So I have 2 Japanese American nephews who actually live in Japan. This is the first one, Kai, and this is Jin. And so in doing this project, I was more connecting to their culture and learning more about their culture of being Japanese and what they do to bring in the new year. And so what they do is they steam this rice. And it happens usually in the week between Christmas and New Year's. And then they take the rice, it's cooked and steamed, and they put it in this bowl called an usu, and they pound it until it gets almost kind of like this consistency of bread dough. And then they bring that onto a table where they portion it off and make mochi balls. And if you haven't had it, it's very chewy. It's really hard to know when to swallow, but this is what mochi looks like when it's made. And I love that connecting of generations coming together over food. I'm sure all of you, and actually if you want to put in the chat, I'm sure all of you can think about something and from your childhood that brought people together around food, because we all have that. There's always something. For me, it was making pasta with my grandmother. And this for Japanese Americans, it's making mochi. And so I was lucky to do this. And now, the film is really not just about this mochisuki ceremony, but it's really about the Japanese American experience as told through making mochi. And this, for those of you that don't recognize him, this is George Takei. I tried for 2 years to get him to do an interview with me, and he finally did one in February. And so he is in the film, which is lovely. And I'm going to just play a little trailer.
Mochi was something that we ate at New Year's, but incarcerated behind barbed wires, I learned how mochi was made. It was spine-tingling.
You have to have mochi at New Year's, otherwise it's just not the same holiday.
When they say you're supposed to eat as many as your age, I get close to it.
Japanese immigrants who came to the United States in the late 19th century, they brought with them their foodways. They needed to recreate home in their new homeland.
Our grandfather was recognized by the Japanese American community as the Rice King. He was one of the first to grow sweet rice. They had a great going concern here.
The day that Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, leaders of the Japanese American community were picked up, and soon after that, the forced removal starts to happen.
Soldiers with rifles and shiny bayonets began banging on the door. One of the 2 soldiers pointed his bayonet at our father. It was terrifying to us kids. My mother came out. She had our baby sister in one arm, a heavy duffel bag in the other, and tears were streaming down her cheeks.
The place had been literally stripped down to the bottom. Everything was liquidated.
When they were all interned, my grandfather said, I need to document this injustice so it never happens again. They wanted to continue to educate their kids on Japanese culture, and my grandfather photographed this.
I think about what it took to want to be Japanese in that moment. To hear that my grandparents were able to make mochi in camp, it amazes me. That is such a defining moment of resilience.
My parents wanted to raise us very American, but on the other hand, they wanted to preserve what was important to them, and that came in the way of food.
I'm Mai, I'm 15, and I've been pretty much coming here my whole life. My grandpa runs the show, he's 82.
It's really nice to see families carrying on all of these traditions and to know that things are going to go on the way that you remember them, even when you're gone.
So, especially right now in this moment in time, it feels like a very important film to get out there. So that's one film that I'm working on. The other one, which is a little more lighthearted, is called The Primetime Band. And that's me on the left playing bassoon. I was a band geek in high school. I played flute, clarinet, and bassoon. And again, the more personal, the more universal the story. And so for me, I heard about this band in Santa Barbara that was made up of primarily people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, about 80 people strong. And they rehearse every Tuesday, and then they perform throughout Santa Barbara County. And I love this coming together of all of these people forming this community, having this sense of purpose, overcoming obstacles. Like this gentleman right here has Parkinson's, and what it takes to continue to play the trombone with Parkinson's. Or this woman, Heather, doesn't have a rotator cuff anymore, and how could she figure out how to continue to play the flute? And so I loved it. It really fit all of those things that I learned about lives well lived into this really wonderful, wonderful film. So I'm going to show you a little clip of this, and this still has time code on it because it's very fresh.
1, 2. There is some magic in making music with other people. It just feels good to be able to be part of an ensemble and doing something creative.
You get people from so many backgrounds coming together and sharing an experience. The experience of making music together is something that is really quite magical.
Sharing that shared experience of being together as a group, not just as musicians, but as humans.
Music can change people's life. The smile it brings, the happiness it can create, to have a community of people like you that share the same passion.
It gives all of us a sense of community and camaraderie and a chance to do something that we used to love.
And there's also a number of the people, so that's just it. And then there's going to be interviews like Lives Well Lived with people where we go more into depth in each of the people. But a number of the people in this, in the Primetime Band, are also part of a group called the Music Van that goes into third grade classrooms and introduces instruments to 8-year-olds for the first time. And this is a little clip from that. This will also be part of the movie.
We visit almost 60 schools and we see 2,000 kids every year. First half hour, we talk about the instruments, and then the second half hour, they get to play everything. And I draw from the Primetime Band for my docents.
I went to Hope School and I learned to play the clarinet in this very room, starting in the 3rd grade. And so I'm hoping that at least one 3rd grader at Hope School will get inspired and play the clarinet and come back 60 years later to inspire yet another generation.
We get to enjoy how instruments play and to find out how they sound like. like really loud, and I was like going crazy with it, like.
And and this is the very last thing that I'll show. This is the most recent film that I'm working on called The Jollytologist. And it is about a man named Alan Klein who calls himself the Jollytologist. And it's really about getting through challenging times using laughter and humor. So I'll show you a little clip of that.
So I call myself a Jollytologist. It is registered, so don't steal it. Just recently looked up what a Jollytologist might be with the all-knowing AI, and it said, I need my glasses, thank you, and it's upside down. So AI said, a Jollytologist is someone who studies and promotes the healing power of humor, joy, and laughter in everyday life. Essentially, it's like a scientist of joy, in quotation marks. A scientist of joy, that was so amazing. And that's a person who helps others use humor as a tool for reducing stress, improving health, and coping with difficult situations. And for me, a Jollytologist shows people how to use humor in not so funny stuff. 25 words or less. And I made it up because I believe you can do whatever you want to do in this life. You can be whoever you want to be.
So that just gives you a little tiny glimpse. And then I will open it up for questions. I know Janine's got a lot of them, but you can reach out to me here. I answer all my emails, and Janine will have that in the email as well. And I really thank you so much for putting up with my little clips and everything. And I'm going to stop sharing now if I can figure out that button here. It's kind of crazy on my screen. Okay, stop. There we go. Okay, got it.
Hi, thank you so much. And one of the things that struck me as I was watching is how these films of yours are really meeting the moment. I mean, certainly we all need to know the history of Japanese incarceration in the United States. And I think we all want our personal Jollytologist right now. I don't know about you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing both of those. I'm going to queue up alternately because we really got, many of you sent in questions ahead of time, and we really got two groupings of questions. One was around this Encore theme and making transitions and thinking about our next phase. And the other were about how to do these intergenerational connections. So I'm going to queue up some of those. And if you have some additional questions, anyone listening, go ahead and put them in the chat and maybe put a question mark in front of them so we can kind of monitor them. But I'm going to start with a question that we received ahead of time. That, changing careers at this life stage can be both exhilarating and frightening. And so how did you decide to transition from, academia, which people perceive as being fairly safe, to a filmmaker?
I know.
So tell us
crazy.
how you did it, and maybe more importantly, how you built up kind of the courage or not to do that.
That's a really good question. And I think that I have been very lucky to have really positive role models in my life who always told me to follow my passion, wherever that might lead. I was a business major undergrad. I took a photo class for fun. I fell in love with it. I decided to not do business and go into photography, which, that even then I just thought if I settle when in my 20s, what is it going to be like the rest of my life? And so I have never let money stand in the way of an idea or a project or a passion that I wanted to do. And I think that, I didn't know anything about making films. Lives Well Lived was my first film. I think a couple of things. One is I followed my passion. Two is I wasn't afraid to admit that I didn't know what I was doing and to ask people for help. I think that we do sometimes forget to ask people for help. And there's so many people that if you have a good idea, want to step up and help out and make it happen. And so I think, just having the courage, which sometimes is difficult, but that comes with having a sense of purpose, having the community that helps support you in doing those things, and having that resilience and positivity and positive attitude. All of those things go hand in hand with really jumping off that cliff and starting something new.
So Sky, We all think you're a superstar, and if you're looking at the chat, you'll see that. And how did you deal with so many people that I encounter, kind of who are in this, okay, I want to do something, I want to follow my passion, I want to do something with meaning and purpose. But we start dealing with that internalized ageism. Am I too old to do this? Am I too old to start that? Did you encounter that at all, or were you just like, I got this?
I think because I had my grandmother as my role model who, she didn't start working out at the gym until she was 80. So I guess she kind of instilled in me that it's never too late to start something new. And I think I never thought about what my age was as a limiting factor. And my grandmother would say something which I understand now a little bit more clearly. She would say age is just a number. I don't think that's exactly what she meant. I think she owned her age very proudly, but she didn't want to be defined by that. So she didn't want to have people tell her what she could and could not do because she was a certain age. And I think that that's really important internally to believe that same thing about ourselves, that that should not determine whether or not you can or cannot do something. Yes, our bodies definitely change as we age, but I think, if you don't try, you're never going to succeed. So you need to try.
Sky, that sounds like a mantra. It's not too late. Dreams don't have an expiration date. So thanks for
I like
sharing.
that.
So we're also getting a bunch of questions really about intergenerational. I know a number of people here are either with programs that serve older adults and are interested in intergenerational connection. But Connie from LA hi Connie, raised a really interesting question in the chat, and I think it relates to some of the topics that you were raising in your film. Reality check. How can this work be more integrated in schools as funding to both educational institutions and public media is shrinking at the same time? Any thoughts about that? Because I think I personally know that funding for programs like this is already shrinking, and people are also feeling a need to ramp them up. Would love your thoughts.
Well, I think yes, all of that is shrinking, but I also think that there are people out there who are willing to still fund and fund even more because they know that it's not going to be federally funded. So it's a little harder to find the dollars, but they are still there. I think that in terms of getting things into schools and doing things, it takes an advocate to want to make that happen. I'm reminded of Ariel Galinsky. I know you're on the board of the Legacy Project. And she's going out, reaching out to universities all over the country to make these intergenerational connections happen. And we're going to do a screening of Lives Will Live with her to make that happen. So I think it takes somebody who really wants to take charge and to make it happen. And we have been successful with our project at the university because there is a teacher in place who makes it happen every quarter and who really follows through. And it does take extra work, but it doesn't take any extra funding because it's already in the context of a class, which is why, I love sharing that PBS link because schools can use that. It's not a heavy lift for an educator to plug that into a class. It meets all the core standards. So I think making it easier to have those relationships happen to connect generations. And then, if it seems like it's too monumental to do it on a bigger level, certainly do it on a small personal level, like I do with these dinners. I mean, there's so many easy ways. It doesn't have to be something massive. You can start small and grow it from there.
Yeah, so talk to us a little bit more. A lot of the questions had kind of this common theme, and I think people are interested in doing, for example, intergenerational program, and people don't know how to start is issue number one. And the second is, and I've seen this in people who've reached out to me, there's somehow maybe some magical thinking that if I just put people of different age groups in the same room, boom, there'll be intergenerational connection. And, what I've learned from my own experience is if people have common interests, common values, I work on a lot of political campaigns that end up being intergenerational because we both want a better world, that kind of thing. Talk to us about the kind of nitty gritty. If you were someone, you're in an organization serving older adults, you know that intergenerational connection is important for both younger and older people, and you're not Sky Bergman, you haven't already made this film. How would you start?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think reaching out to schools, to universities, to boys and girls clubs, to, where young people are. And I think you are absolutely right, Janine. You cannot just put two people in a room together of different ages and expect that something's going to happen. If you put two people of the same age together in a room, nothing would happen. So why would it be any different if you're putting two people together of different ages? I think that having a common goal or purpose, it comes back to that sense of purpose. I think those are the most successful intergenerational projects. There have been a lot of projects around storytelling. That's a really nice way to bring generations together because they have this common goal of doing that, but also activism, creating something, cooking something together, having that idea that you're going to do something that leads to something in the end, I think is really a lovely way to make that happen.
Okay. Talk to me about some of the challenges that either you've experienced in bringing people together. And this is where, audience participation, if you've tried to bring people together and seen challenges, pop them in the chat. But what are some of those very real barriers that happen when you try to bring older and younger people together? And what are some ways that you found are helpful in overcoming them?
Yeah, I think that it is difficult to try and bring people together. First of all, just getting them physically in the same space or even in the same Zoom room sometimes can be a challenge. I think there has to be the why, make the call to action really clear as to what it is that you're doing so that it doesn't just feel like it's another Zoom meeting or another gathering of people. I think that having a reason as to why people are coming together really helps to set the tone and to bring people together. I also found, and I was a resident assistant when I was in college, I always had food, always have food at an event if you're doing it in person. I mean, it's amazing, but somehow that does kind of like make something fun, even if you're doing some political issue. I think having something nice that people will feel good about and they can take away with them, I think is really important. So that call to action, that reason of the why is really important. Again, it's like, okay, we're going to gather people, but we don't have a reason why. Well, people aren't going to come for something like that. And a number of places have shown the film and asked older adults and students to come together or younger people to come together. And it's a reason for people to gather. And then we have a discussion afterwards. And all of a sudden they get to know people from other age groups. And so you have that call to action first, and then you facilitate that joining of generations and that breaking down of those stereotypes, I think.
Um, so speaking of stereotypes, I have noticed a huge increase, and I call them generational clickbait articles, right? Um, Boomers hate this, Gen Z hate this, they hate each other, and all of that kind of thing. I'm actually writing an article on LinkedIn on Thursday about clickbait articles. Why do you think they're so popular, and what do you think we should be doing about it?
Well, I think
It's like nonstop.
AI has certainly helped with the proliferation of that because all of a sudden you have AI that can write a lot of stuff and also, have these keywords that are going to get it. Unfortunately, it gets people's attention very quickly. I think, is there a way? I think you're doing a great job of it with changing the narrative. How do we have clickbait in the other direction where we can counterbalance some of those terrible things that are out there? How do we have something that is going to drive traffic to something that is changing the narrative? And I think, Janine, you've done a really good job of that. And, I certainly post every week about an intergenerational team that has come about. And I think that's how we counteract it. We try and drown out the noise and really give the positive, put the positive out there.
Yeah. Okay, here is something that I would like everybody to think about for a moment. I'm going to ask Sky a question, but I'm also asking everybody here a question. When you're in one of these intergenerational conversation settings, and I've facilitated hundreds of these, what's your favorite question to ask that draws great stuff from both people? And one of my favorites, I'll start, is especially in the workplace discussions that I do, where, some employer has reached out to me and said, I can't manage these intergenerational teams and they're at war with each other. I like to ask people in the room, what's some stereotype that you face based on your age, and how would you counter it?
Mhm.
What are your favorite questions to ask? And this is for everybody. Just either a question that you've heard of or a question that you think would be a good one to ask for intergenerational conversation. Just go ahead and put them in, pop them in the chat. But Sky, go ahead.
Yeah, I like the question that I like is to tell me three interesting or fun facts about you, like something that nobody else would know, because I think it brings back some interesting memories, whether you're 20 or you're 80. Everybody has something buried that is some fun or interesting fact, and it kind of breaks the ice and breaks down those barriers a bit. And I think that oftentimes that was one of the first questions I would ask everyone that I interviewed, and it was really interesting to just sit back and listen. I mean, I think one of the key thing is to really spend more time listening than talking when you ask those questions. And it's just things go off in very different tangents, and it's lovely. Those are some of my favorite ways to start the conversation.
And Scott, that's very similar to an activity that I've done in some of my intergenerational conversations in the workplace. I pair people up and I say, you've got 3 minutes to come up with three things that you have in common.
Mhm.
People like kind of freak out and then they're talking. And what is fascinating to me is every single time I've done it, not once has anyone ever said, oh, it's our age, our generation. It might be we like the same sports team. We've traveled to the same places. We both have a cat named Myra. I'm making this stuff up, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
And so I think, and we've got some great questions that are coming in the chat. Sandy, what was your favorite song in high school? What's the best thing about being your age? What are you finding is interesting or capturing your attention these days? Favorite food, always a good one, going back to your
Yes.
food topic. Yeah, but keep popping those in. Um, so as I've mentioned before, most of my work these days is within the broad context of ageism. It's specifically about making the case to employers for intergenerational teams and how to make them work. I'd love to know why you believe intergenerational teams in the workplace are important. And I feel like when I've looked at your teams, they are intergenerational, but share an example from your work and why you think having those different generations together is important.
I love it because I have lots, as you can tell from my photos and for the work that I do, I have people that I'm working with that are in their 80s and 90s and people in their 20s that are part of my team. And they bring different ideas and different ways of seeing the world. And I love seeing the world through their eyes. And so we have the most interesting conversations about what is happening and why a film might fit into one genre or another, or why the Mochi movie, for example, is really important right at this moment. And when I'm talking to one of my 20-year-old interns about, well, this is the history of what happened in our country, and we need to remember so that history doesn't repeat itself again. And I think that having those, and then talking to somebody in their 80s or 90s who remembers living through it. And so I think everybody brings a different breadth of their own experience. And it's so rich. It's a rich tapestry that's created when you have all these different ages. It's just, otherwise you're kind of like tunnel vision. And I think that can really be to the detriment of companies when they are so tunnel vision that they don't have a variety of different people working with them.
Yeah. So I would love your thoughts on this. So now I'm going to revert to my main ageism topic. We know that ageism is real. We know that it's directed against both older people and younger people. And sometimes I literally feel like we are pushing a rock uphill. There are people like you and me and many on this call who are, preaching about the benefits of intergenerational connection and education. We happen to know that one of the most powerful things to overcome ageism is intergenerational connection. But there are a whole lot of people out there that do hold those stereotypes. Younger people who are just, especially in the current gerontocracy narrative, who are just like old people, get out of the way. Older people who are really frustrated with the current job market, who are like, doing some variation of kids these days. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly enough, I have a younger brother who's 20 years younger than I am, so he's in his 40s, and he's feeling age discrimination in his job right now because he's in IT and high tech, and he's
In
old.
In tech, 30 is old.
Right, he's old. And we have had some interesting conversations about that because, you know, that's not something he thought that he would experience in his 40s. And, you know, I think that it can be discouraging. I think that part of it is that we have to work really hard to overcome those challenges and those stereotypes and show people that, you know, it doesn't matter if you're 20 or 40 or 60 or 80, you're still a human being and you still bring a lot to the table. And yes, you may have certain strengths and weaknesses, but so does everyone. And how can we work together to really take the strengths of all those different generations and bring those together so that one person's strength overcomes somebody else's weakness? How do you do that? I think, you know, you do training, you bring people in, you talk to the people that are hiring. It can be, you know, a real struggle. And I think if you're out there, I know a lot of, in particular, women who are out there and maybe they have had a career and they want to change careers. And I think it's much more difficult when you're trying to be hired by somebody than to just start your own career. I know the people that I think are the most successful that I have seen are people that have encore careers that they have started themselves. And so I would say, don't be afraid to do something like that, where you take an idea and make it something, because that's certainly what I have done. And I've seen so many other women do that pretty successfully.
So, Sky, I'm sure you did not wake up this morning and read my LinkedIn article, but I literally just wrote about when I was in my mid-30s and my oldest daughter was born. I soon discovered that work did not work for women who had children, and I ended up starting my own thing. And it seems to me that there's kind of a lot of similarity between how work doesn't work for women with children and how work is not working for older adults these days. So it was kind of a call to action and encouraging people to think about doing their own thing. I want to make sure that I leave time because I've got a bunch of questions here. But all of you are here on the call. If you have a question for Sky, if you that is related to either, you know, transitioning Encore career or to intergenerational connection, you could either pop it in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, I can call on you. Okay, my friend Erica Ryder. Erica, would you be willing to unmute yourself and ask Sky your question in real life, or would you prefer that I ask it? Hey, friend.
Hi, I can ask. I'm just curious, you know, in seeing who you've captured and listening to, you know, what folks are saying and all these different opportunities for how people start these programs. Even in Denver right now, big brothers, big sisters, they're desperate for male mentors and they have too many female mentors. And I'm just curious what your observations are around culture and gender when it comes to what you've seen and maybe things that are working well and what could be better. And is it, you know, and I will say for me in business, I see a dearth of white men who are the chosen mentors for often women of color in business. And is it an issue of outreach? Is it an issue, you know, just curious what your thoughts are.
And Sky, to warn you, Erica's a longtime friend. She is a business consultant for people who want to do business for good, has run her own community event space, and she always asks hard questions.
No, that is a good question. I think that in the programs that I've run, I would say it skews 75% women, older adults, 25% men. There are men, but I think they have to be corralled a little bit more to be part of it. And in the workforce, I don't have the experience of doing it in the workforce. I did do some DEI trainings with like Land O'Lakes and some other people. And Land O'Lakes in particular really had an interesting program where they did reverse mentoring, where they had the young person was actually the mentor for the older person. And I think that role reversal was really successful for them. And that helped to break down that older white guy being the mentor for some, other ethnicity woman being the, underling. And I think that when we start changing the way that we look at mentorship, and instead of it being, okay, here's the mentor and here's the mentee, what if we were mentoring each other? And what if we were on even ground instead of having that hierarchy, which I think already sets it up a little bit for failure? I think that having that mutual, helping of each other is really where intergenerational work and practices is going to will be successful.
Sky, love that. And I love, you're singing my song about reciprocal mentoring, right? Because we have so much to learn from each other. I'm going to just pause for a minute and see if anybody else has burning questions for Sky right now. If not, go ahead and just put them in the chat or raise your hand. I'm kind of scanning across. I am not necessarily seeing raised hands. Oh, Gary Phelan, hi, I'm seeing you, and know that Gary Phelan is the employment lawyer that I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to be reaching out to you to see if we can get a replay for you. Okay.
So absolutely. I have a question, or not a question, but an observation.
You bet.
Okay, is on this topic, and I loved it because I had written it down and it's like, wow, it must be psychic energy or something through my laptop. But if anyone's ever seen the show Hacks,
oh yeah,
that to me is a classic example of two totally different people. Deborah Vance, I know the characters, Ava Gardner, a 30-ish writer and a 72-year-old comedian. And it's incredible, but they are learning from each other. It's not the typical mentoring relationship. And what's the best part about it is that together they're better than they each were individually. And that's the essence of team, is by the collaboration there's a better outcome. But I'm so on board with Janine's really, advocacy on behalf of intergenerational workplaces, and how, it's not the typical view of diversity, but it's diversity and it makes the workplace better.
Okay. Gary, thanks for weighing in. And I'm not going to queue up our workplace age discrimination questions to you right now because you're not prepared. We've got some interesting comments going on in the chat about men dying off earlier and men being much more likely to draw their identity from work. So when they don't have work, they lose their identity. I'm wondering about can being a mentor or being involved in intergenerational conversation kind of provide maybe some of that identity or meaning or purpose that people lose. You have thoughts about that, Sky?
Yeah, well, I think, it's interesting that you talk about when men in particular lose or retire from their job, they don't have that sense of purpose. That's what they're missing, is a sense of purpose. So how many times can you play golf or go travel, or they need to have that drive, that sense of purpose. And I think that intergenerational connections can come in many different ways. It doesn't have to be that we specifically are looking for intergenerational connections. I think that I often counsel people to look for nonprofits that they really believe in, that they can help volunteer for. And there you go. You're going to have an intergenerational connection and interaction because you're probably going to be working with people that are younger. So giving back and doing things like that, I think, is a way to get involved and to be, if you can't do this massive, like, I'm going to create an intergenerational project, be part of one, create your own, be like donate your time and your what you can do for people. And that gives you your sense of purpose, it gives you a community, and it gives you a more positive attitude. Because when we are doing something for others, it comes back to us tenfold.
Yeah. I think that is absolutely great advice. We've got some, and Norman kind of weighing in, helping others figure it out. The challenge of retirement has helped me to figure it out for myself. So that helping. Sky, you've got kind of a bonus for people who attended. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you're offering? And we could go ahead and put a link in the chat.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll go ahead and put that link in the chat, but I'll also be sending it out in a follow-up email. But tell people what to do with the link while I find it and what it is that you're offering. And you are just so generous, my friend. So everybody, I always ask people when they're going to be on a coffee chat, do you have some kind of offer or something that you would, we can do a drawing for at the end? And Sky basically just said, "Oh, I'll give everybody an ebook."
Yeah, so I'm going to just show you the website, and this is the link. So this is you can download the book as a PDF or an EPUB, which should work on a Kindle. You can also watch the film. This is a 56-minute version of the film, which is on Lives Well Lived. If you click on this, it'll take it to full screen. I have my discussion guide there if you want to bring it to a community and use it. And the topics explored and some of these things here. I do ask if you like the book, if you would consider leaving a 5-star review. That's what you can do for me, because that really helps to get the word out there. And, share. This will be live for 2 weeks, and then the link will disappear. But for 2 weeks, you can, use this and share it with your friends, and then it will disappear. And but share the film, share whatever. I think that when we put those things out there in the world, only good things come back.
And I think, so one of the things I'd encourage is this is a great film to watch with some friends. I think Sky went early on in changing the narrative, or maybe it was just when the pandemic hit and we couldn't do live workshops anymore. You came in, we had people look at the film, and then it drives a really great conversation about, what do you want next in your life, and what have you learned from someone younger or older, that kind of thing. So it's a great conversational topic as well. I would love for all of you to join me in thanking Sky.
And I'm going to just share one more slide.
Okay, you can unmute yourself. And
this was my grandma.
Before we leave, I will be telling you who's on next in October. Okay.
I just love this quote from my grandmother: "In a world where you can be anything, be kind." And so I will leave you all with that. Thank you so much for being here. I really this was great. Thank you, Janine, for having me.
Sky, thank you so much for doing it. Everybody, next month, October 2nd, mark your calendar. I'll be sending an invite. We are going to be featuring Andy Lyons, who is a podcaster, as her Encore. She was a 4-time business owner. She is now a podcaster, and her podcast is featuring people who've started new things at age 65 or older. So if you want lots of inspiration, join us next month, and I'll be sending out a link in our Friday email. Thank you all so much. It is so lovely to see all of you, and I'm so glad that we are restarting Coffee Chats. This is reminding me that even in a world which is seeming really, really heavy sometimes, that there are people doing amazing and good work and who want good things, not only for ourselves, but for generations to come. So Sky, thank you for your work. So appreciate it. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of the week. Bye.